Good afternoon and happy Wednesday to all of you. And once again, let me share with you what my mother and father taught me to be the two most important words in the English language. And those words are thank you. Thank you for all of you who collectively make up the Third Way community and who make it your intention and your purpose to join us for our Third Way Dialogue series, session after session. These things would not be possible and could not be successful without your participation, and we owe you all a great debt of gratitude on behalf of Third Way. As most of you know, my name is Antjuan Seawright. I am back again this year as a senior visiting fellow for Third Way, primarily in the space of having these dialogue and conversations with change makers and newsmakers throughout the country. And we're just so thrilled, happy, and I consider myself one blessed boy from South Carolina to be able to have the 18th Secretary of HUD join us today. In February, around the world, and certainly in this country, we pause to elevate and highlight the contributions of so many African Americans and so many events that have really pushed us a step closer towards perfection. Names we know and some we do not. And today we have a true history maker and world changer, someone who has stood up when others expected her to sit down. She sat down when many people wanted her to stand up. She is laid in the road for not only the Democratic Party, but for this country. A former mayor, a lawyer, former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, the former national president of Delta Sigma Theta, the big sister and dear friend of my leader, my political father, Jim Clyburn. But most importantly, you know the body of work that Secretary Marcia Fudge has put together throughout her career. And I am totally convinced when the pages of history dry for this first rough draft that we all enjoy, by her name, you will see Marcia Fudge, one of the most consequential leaders of our day. Without further ado, we welcome the 18th Secretary of HUD to Third Way, Marcia Fudge. Welcome, Madam Secretary.
Thank you so much for having me. That was very, very kind. I appreciate it.
Well, every good son must present his mother in a proper way. I just left out the part that I oftentimes refer to you in private as the former chair of the light-skinned caucus in the United States Congress, but I left that part out today.
That's so silly.
Secretary Fudge, again, thank you for having us. But I do want to talk about your role and your vision for the agency. Most people, when they think about HUD in recent years, they only think about the disaster the former secretary was under the previous administration. I don't want to go into the politics of that, but you have had your own vision and your own leadership style for the agency and trying to recreate a niche so that the agency is relevant in today's conversation. And there's no doubt in my mind, and I don't think people argue, that you perhaps are one of the most popular cabinet officials in this administration. Can you talk about your vision for the agency and what you see your role as in being the secretary of the agency?
Again, thank you so much for having me. I think certainly if there is any agency of the federal government that really works toward bringing this nation to the beloved community, it is us. HUD is the one agency that touches people who are most in need, because we understand that housing is so critical. It is at the crossroads of everything that is good in this country. We all know that your zip code often determines the outcomes in your life, but they should not. We also know that discrimination and redlining and all of the things that we have been fighting for so long as a nation are also within the purview of HUD. So my vision is to ensure that every single person in this country, no matter their station in life, no matter their zip code, has a decent and safe place to live. That we can, in fact, make housing affordable and get people into homes so that they are not homeless. We know that we have a homeless problem in this country, Antjuan. Some 500,000 people sleep on the streets every day. We want to fix that. We want to be sure that every single person who wants to own a home, the American dream, as we all know, has the opportunity to get a home. And for those who have nowhere to go but to turn to the federal government, we want to be sure we take care of them. It is just that simple. And then the other thing we want to do, because people forget about the urban development part of HUD, is to help build and rebuild communities across this country. It's very, very simple. Our job is to get people decent housing and to help build communities.
You know, since since being confirmed, some would argue that you have broken the speed limit, you have ran through stop signs, failed to yield at yield signs, and a number of other things in terms of getting things done at agencies. When you look back in a snapshot of retrospect very quickly, what do you think your biggest accomplishments have been at the agency thus far?
I would say three. One is certainly that we look at everything, Antjuan, through a lens of equity. So we're looking at bias in the appraisal process. We know that people of color, especially Black people, have lost hundreds of billions of dollars in undervaluations of their homes. We have looked at how we assist people that carry a lot of student loan debt, be able to qualify for a mortgage. That significantly affects people of color. We have tried to make sure that we can assist people in purchasing homes that we sell as an agency. We as well have started to try to right the ship, Antjuan, so that everything is fair. People are on a level playing field. We have made housing supply available. We're dealing with homeless crisis. We're doing an awful lot of things, a lot more than people would expect that we have accomplished in such a short time, but we've done an awful lot of work, Antjuan.
You've been on the job for almost a year, and with every ounce of success sometimes comes a pound of challenges. If you had to describe both the challenges you see at the agency and just in the housing industry as a whole, because we know there are challenges, we know whether it's making it accessible, we know whether it's making it affordable, we know whether it's making sure that small towns and cities can access the programs and the resources available. Talk about some of the challenges both at the agency and the industry level you've been able to see and witness firsthand.
There are three major challenges. Obviously, we know we have a housing supply issue. We know that because of COVID, we have not been able to get product through the system fast enough. So what it has done is it has just made the problem worse for us to build affordable housing. Every single person in this country, no matter where you live, knows how expensive housing is in this country today. And it is expensive because we just don't have enough supply. It's strictly a supply and demand situation. So because the demand is so much higher than the supply, the housing prices are going through the roof. So the average person can no longer afford to purchase a home. That's issue number one that we are trying to deal with, and find a way that we can make housing affordable through things that we can do through HUD. So we've increased low-income housing tax credits. We have increased our housing trust fund for low and very low homeowners. We have put more money into CDBG. We have put resources as many as $10 billion to assist us with addressing the homeless crisis. So that's one major problem. Secondly is staffing. When we came to this agency, we were probably down about 1,000 employees. We've gotten up about 400 more, but we need 600 more. So certainly to be able to do the job that we are charged to do, we need the right people and we need all hands on deck, basically. And the third problem, I think, is just to make people understand what we do. There is an issue of educating the public about how we can be helpful. People don't realize, Antjuan, that we serve some 5,000 communities every day. We help people pay their rent to the tune of 13 million people a month. We do an awful lot of things that people aren't aware of. So we want to make sure that we are proactive, that we let people know what is available to them, and let them know how much we care about what we do.
You know, the housing, the HUD budget, traditionally, I know we're not necessarily living through traditional times, has not only been the appetizer, but it's been the dessert and the main course with any meal within the federal government. But through previous administrations, there's been the slash and burn effort in order to check a political box. Can you talk about the budget at HUD and where it was and where it is and what you're trying to do and what you think you're going to need in order to set yourself up to be in a position to be successful?
Well, I think maybe I can tell you better this way. Prior to this administration coming into office, the last two HUD budgets requested a 30% decrease, 30% decrease. So you can imagine how far behind we are. the HUD budget has to encompass so many things, Anton. We need tens of billions of dollars, someplace in the 50 to $60 billion range, which we believe that we're going to be able to accomplish, because the president, to his credit, has been so very supportive in what we're doing, has charged us to make sure that we look at everything through a lens of equity, and has said to us, not only do I want you to address discrimination, I want you to reverse it. And so they know that it takes resources to do that. So I'm really comfortable that as the 2023 budget comes out, we're going to probably be in pretty good shape. Now, would we be as well off as we would be if we did things like pass Build Back Better? Maybe not, but we're going to make a difference, Antjuan, no matter what budget they give us. We're going to change people's lives. I'm determined to do it. Our staff is determined to do it. And we're going to make it happen.
I know you just flirted with policy for a second, and I'll flirt back in a second, but I do want to deal with people for a second. And I heard you say this on the Breakfast Club and make reference to it. But on any given night, Madam Secretary, how many people in this country are homeless? Because I don't think people have perspective, depth, or width around the issue and the crisis we face when it comes to housing in this country.
The last accurate count we have is 2020. That number is about 580,000. We are hopeful that when we look at the 21 numbers, that those numbers are going to go down, because once again, this administration came in and put $10 billion towards nothing but dealing with homelessness, 70,000 vouchers, and another $5 billion to assist getting people into permanent housing. So we're hopeful the numbers are going to go down. But when you look at the fact that so many people just can't afford to live in the communities they live in, Antjuan. I was in California, I was in San Francisco. The median sales price of a home in San Francisco is over $1 million. It's over $1 million in Seattle. It's $800,000 in Denver, and I could go on and on. And so when you live in those communities, you are almost forced to find low-income housing. And if it doesn't exist, where do you go? And the biggest challenge we have is that the largest growing groups of people who are sleeping unsheltered in this country are senior citizens and families with children. It is a crisis that the entire country needs to be aware of, and we have to do something to stop the bleeding, and that's what it is right now.
You know, I do want to pivot or transfer our dialogue to policy for a second. We know what the American Rescue Act, I call it the American Survival Act, because this country was literally on life support prior to its passage. We know the tens of millions of billions of dollars that was put into trying to save folks from losing their homes in the American Survival Act. And now, fast forward the tape, we have this proposal that's been passed by the House known as Build Back Better. Some would argue that at any given moment, the plug will be pulled and death will be pronounced. I'm a cautiously optimistic little fella from South Carolina, so I believe delayed but not necessarily denied. If we do not pass Build Back Better, what will that mean for HUD and the housing crisis in this country? And before we even answer that, in Build Back Better, can you tell us how the bill was shaped and molded to deal with the housing crisis in this country and HUD?
Well, currently, there is a request in Build Back Better to put about $150 billion into housing, which would include upgrading public housing, which we have not really significantly dealt with the capital issues they've had for more than 50 years. Build new affordable and low income and moderate income housing. And thirdly, to make sure that the housing we have is safe. And so if we don't pass Build Back Better, we are not going to have those resources. Now, certainly we're going to have our budget, and we're going to have the president's budget, which is going to be released, I think, in the next few weeks. But think about how much we could do with those resources. Right now, it is estimated to just bring public housing locations up to speed, just to be safe. Antjuan, it's going to cost us $70 billion. We're not going to have 70 with a B billion, because think about it. For the last 50 years, at least, we have disinvested in housing. We have not had any major building in this country through the government or for people who are low income or moderate income. And so what we find ourselves in a place where it has gotten so bad, that's what it's going to take to bring it up to speed. $70 billion. We won't have that if we don't have Build Back Better. Further, I know that there are some things that everybody believes that we should have. Build Back Better also assists us when we start to talk about taking care of aging parents, childcare, and daycare. It also talks about how we live as a society and how we can make people's lives better. Prescription drugs. There are many things in Build Back Better that every single person in this country needs, no matter what side of the aisle they sit on. It is a matter of taking care of the people we serve. So that's the major thing. We just won't have those resources. We will still do some of it. We just can't do as much as we would have been able to do. And I'm with you. I am optimistic that some of this is going to get through, because every single city in America, every single small town, every rural community, we all need housing. Tribal lands, we need housing. It is something that is universal. And I do believe that that our better angels will come to us and say, this is something we have to do.
Well, I'm glad you're on my side, because I've seen you be on the opposite side before, and I don't want those kind of troubles.
No, I listen, it is the battle of our lifetime. It really is what I do. And I just hope that people will realize at some point, we cannot live in a world by ourselves. We have to look at what is going on around us. And if they take a good look, they will see people sleeping on the streets. They will see their neighbors having difficulty keeping their homes. That is what we are here for, Antjuan. You know, we have kept more people in their homes because of our forbearance and our moratoriums. We have kept more people in their rental units because of emergency rental assistance. We have done everything we know how to do. And we're just going to keep doing what we know is right and what we are able to do. So we've got our work cut out for us, but we are up to the task.
You know, I want to add some background color to the picture about something that you and I personally care about, and that's people who look like us, those who come from communities that look like ours. You know, I said when this pandemic first started that when America has a cough, Black America has the flu. And one would argue the same thing for those who identify as brown in this country. Can you put for us or frame for us the housing crisis and the impact on Black and brown communities in this country?
Oh, no question about it. When you talk about those who are sleeping unsheltered, more than 40% of all of the people sleeping on America's streets are people of color. A report just came out indicating that every group of people in this country, except one, Black people, had an increase in home ownership. We know that Black people carry more student debt, and so it has been more difficult for them to get loans to purchase homes. And we know that our communities are not being maintained. So we have rows and rows of vacant housing because nobody cares enough to build up a whole neighborhood, a whole community. And so we see it everywhere. We have continued throughout at least the last 40 to 50 years, been on the low end of everything that is good in this country. But we are changing it here. We are making it so that people that do have student loan debt can still find ways to be creditworthy. We are making sure that we don't undervalue properties because it is in a Black community. We are making sure that we talk to our training and education and technical people to make sure people understand what it is we are doing for them. So, I mean, it is a lot to do, but we're going to do it.
You know, so often we hear about when a house is appraised by someone who looks like us and those who do not, there's a difference in the value. We hear that in certain communities that the neighbor who may have a different skin color than us, their home may be appraised higher than ours for whatever reason. Can you really put some salt on that to make it taste good for people, to help people understand? Because I think people read these stories on the internet and they may not think it's real, but it is certainly real, touchable, and relatable to the Black experience.
Well, we have a report coming out in the next few weeks that's going to prove that it's real, but I will use myself as an example. Antjuan, I live in an all Black community. I live 2 doors, literally 2 doors from an all white community. My house is the same basically as their house. I have the same amount of land. My house is valued at $25,000 than my neighbor 2 doors down. which means that I lose $25,000 in value every year. Think what that is over 10 years. So you really do lose an ability to gain everything you should out of your house, out of the equity in your home. So when you go to sell it, I'm at a distinct disadvantage than my neighbor 2 doors down. This happens every day in this country. Part of it is because of the bias within the appraisal process. And so that's what the report is you're going to see in the next few weeks. And I think you will be pleased that we've done the report, but probably angered by the fact that it has gone on so long and been unaddressed for so long.
Nothing makes my grits cook over more than hearing stories like this, because I know it's real.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, unless you're at the table, chances are, as we learned in AME Church, you're on the menu. The change that's necessary and needed in order to fix this doesn't happen unless we have people like Secretary Fudge fighting for us. I do want to pivot to something I wrote about earlier this week, and that's another crisis within the crisis, and that's climate change. I wrote that climate change has color for thehill.com. Can you, for us, charge the batteries around how the climate crisis we have in this country, how it overlaps with the housing crisis in this country? Because believe it or not, they are very relatable.
Oh, they're relatable in a lot of ways. First, I would suggest that people of color tend to be affected more by climate change than anyone else. We happen to live in more flood zones. We happen to live near more brownfield sites, more factories. We tend to live near water. We find ourselves in a position where when these major storms come through, or when we have trees and forests that are burning down, we are affected more than anybody else. And a perfect example of the fact is that the leading cause of children, Black children and brown children missing school is asthma, because we live next to these factories and these plants that are dirty and that are polluting our air. When you look at places like New Orleans, you look at places like Florida, the Panhandle, there are so many people of color who lose their homes and never really get the resources to rebuild. But thirdly, I would say the most important part of this is that our homes are not built to withstand climate change. So we are looking at a plan through HUD that we just actually released that talks about resiliency, that talks about sustainable living, that talks about how we can retrofit existing homes and how we build new ones so that we can protect the most valuable thing most people of color have, which is their home. And the other thing I think that people need to understand is that our carbon footprint as it relates to housing is probably one of the biggest in the country. So if we can start to build homes that are more energy efficient, that have a smaller carbon footprint, we can change the way we look at climate change, because we are so integral into determining how we're going to move as a nation to reduce our carbon footprint.
How would you say that's intertwined in the conversation around racial equality? Because most of us not only want equity, I think our parents wanted equity. I think my generations want equity and equality. So how would you intertwine climate change, housing, and those around the conversation of racial inequality in this country?
Well, we know climate change is one of the major issues. Well, it's a crisis, quite frankly, in our country today. And so if we don't start to find ways to protect the biggest asset that most people of color have, then I don't know where we end up 10 or 15 years from now, because these storms are going to keep coming. These fires are going to keep coming. These floods are going to keep coming. And so if we know that we are least best positioned to protect our neighborhoods and our homes, then it is just obvious that we are going to be the people who are harmed most. So that is why we're putting so much attention toward climate change. And I think that that's another thing that Build Back Better would have helped us do as well.
You know, I know we're short on time, so I want to come around the mountain. Here I come. I introduced you earlier as we talked about Black History Month and the contributions of so many people. And we all know that every time Black people have had their say in this 200+ experience, the tectonic plates have shifted. As a Black woman, as a former mayor, former chair of the CBC, all the things that your resume consists of, what does this moment mean for you as you sit around one of the biggest tables perhaps in the world. And little Black girls from all across Ohio and all across South Carolina get to see someone who looks like them. What does that mean for you in this moment?
I don't even know if I can really even describe it, but I would say to you that it is important that these little girls that you're talking about see me, see somebody like me in this position. Because as most people are, not just people of color, most people are visual learners. If they see it, they believe that they can be it, and that is important. But most importantly for me, it says that I have done the things that this nation has asked me to do, that I have given everything that I had, that I am a patriot and I too sing America. This is my country. I have gotten a good education. I have worked hard. I have accomplished a lot of things, but I have done it through my faith and my family. But I have achieved things that most people can only dream of, Antjuan. And so I am especially blessed and I am humbled by the opportunity to do God's work. And I believe that's what I do every day.
You know, somewhere in the backwoods of Mississippi, an A.M.E. preacher once said, if a task is once begun, never leave it till it's done. Be the labor, great or small, do it well, or don't do it at all. Don't do it at all. I don't think you will find a person in the world who would argue that the laborer, Marcia Fudge, has done her job very well. We're so proud of you. I personally thank you for just being a friend and a mentor and a mother to me, and watching over me and your daughter in the Ohio's 11th Congressional District. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you.
And thank you all for joining us for our Third Way Dialogue series for the month of February. We will be back with you in the coming days and months and weeks with some interesting guests as we continue to flare out these conversations to make certain that you are informed, engaged, and empowered. So we'll see you next time.